Welcome in to That's a Tap with CT and DJ. We're going to react to the big Canelo fight, defeating Charlo. And man, it was a whitewash, DJ. How you feeling?
Feeling good, CT. Good to see you. Good to see all our fans. Sort of break down the fight. Sort of not the showdown that we expected, and there's no controversy in that sense. I mean, you're right. It was a complete whitewash. It was a clear winner, clear decision winner in Canelo. Yeah, man. Like it was exciting. It's always exciting to see someone with the name value and skill set and the star power of Canelo stepping in to fight. There's always that hype, and carried it throughout fight week. We saw, um, and I felt like, especially for Canelo, going into this fight, there was a lot of questions based off the last fight with Ryder. Because while Canelo did get the nod, there was a lot of questions in terms of how he looked and his inability to get Ryder out of the. Given that he was, injured, there was that Bivol loss that was lurking in the background as well, which he hasn't rematched yet. He's asking for the rematch in his defense, but there's a lot of nuances to it, whereas Bivol's asking for it in a lower weight class to fight for his belts and all these kind of things. So, nonetheless, it was a good night for Canelo because he was able to come back, answer all those questions. He was able to show, look, I'm still the Canelo of the old. I am still, one of the pound for pound best boxers, and there's a reason why I have this following. And he was able to put that on display. And yes, he did fight Jamel Charlo, who has gone up two weight classes from his division to super middleweight. And it's no easy task, but it doesn't take away from the skill of Jamel Charlo. He is a really skilled boxer, and still being able to do what Canelo did to him speaks volumes.
Yeah, obviously, we just before we just get into the fight, we, as you mentioned, got a note. Charlo has had to relinquish because he didn't fight the mandatory, so he
Correct.
relinquished
Yeah.
the super welterweight. And Australian Tim Tszyu is now
Yeah.
the champion.
Yeah.
Canelo is now the unified super middleweight champion. Retains his belt after defeating Charlo in a whitewash a decision
Yeah.
majority,
Yeah.
unanimous. Sorry,
Yeah.
120 to 107. There was a
Yeah.
knockdown in the seventh round, but yeah, like you said, Canelo surprised a few, but not that many people. Yeah, he was supreme, power, too
Yeah.
fast. Were you
Yeah.
surprised more, DJ, at the domination? Did you think it was going to be closer?
Yeah, I mean, look, I was expecting Canelo to get across the line, but I was expecting a bit more of a little bit more action. To be specific, I don't think more specific. If I were to be more specific, if you see the 12th round, it was a lot more an even round, like where it was a bit close to you kind of try and there you can argue that maybe when Charlo could have won that round. It was a close round, but there was a lot of action. There was a lot of return fire from Charlo, whereas the other previous rounds we never saw that. And he kind of, I know there's a lot of fighters and a lot of experts have alluded to the same, but you felt like he'd accepted defeat or even like sort of wanting to survive in there. Maybe almost like as if Canelo's star power got to him, and it was already on defense mode, and he just wanted to try and survive.
Yeah, yeah, you're right. I guess he's fighting a Hall of Famer, so
Yeah,
some guys do meet their match stylistically. I think it was
yeah,
the weight class, like you said, moving up was a big hurdle to overcome.
yeah,
Canelo
yeah,
just looks stronger than ever, um,
yeah, yeah,
stronger, yet quicker than ever.
yeah.
Um,
And
Charlo, yeah, go ahead.
yeah. Sorry, you go, CD.
Um, yeah, I was just going to say, sort of the call out at the end of the fight.
Mm,
He's reluctant to want to fight the Tim Tszyu match because I don't know. We talked about it off air. He feels like maybe it's not a big name for him. He
yeah,
called out Terence Crawford.
yeah. Correct. I mean, look,
Mm.
before, like, I mean, look, there's a few interesting things about the call outs and sort of what's next for both those fighters. But also, worth noting, you mentioned about him relinquishing the title because, he didn't fight the mandatory because he was going two weight classes above. So he was choosing not to fight the mandatory, which meant that he had to relinquish that title. One would argue, sort of like that'll be the uh, next step is to go back and reclaim that title, which Tim Tszyu currently holds. I still think it's an exciting fight. I know he made comments about sort of, he wants bigger fights. I still think it's a big fight because Tim Tszyu's been
Yep.
nothing but devastating. He's been making, he's been having statement making finishes, and he's the current title holder. So it just makes sense for him to go and try to get that. I know he called out Terence Crawford. I mean, look, Terence Crawford seems like, I mean, based off what he was saying after the fight, his reaction was that he was clearly not impressed, and he had a few things to say. He also said that he's no longer interested in that Charlo fight. It'll be a great fight
Mm.
because, I mean, especially straight off that win against Errol Spence, and when Terence Crawford was mentioning that it seemed like a very exciting fight to make. It still could be, right? But there's a lot of
Mm.
ifs, coming up because Errol Spence has activated the rematch clause. And let's not forget, don't let one loss to a really, really supreme boxer make it look like, Errol Spence is a joke. He's a formidable opponent, and then the second time around may be a lot more challenging for Terence Crawford, and especially if Errol Spence and his camp are saying there were complications around surrounding that first camp, so we're planning to rectify that in this one. So you never know what happens in those kind of fights. So like it makes sense rather than to wait for that outcome because that's happening at the end of the year, and then you got to probably consider recovery time. Worth noting though, right? Jamel Charlo has not been the most active boxer as well. Like he's fought once a year
Yeah.
for the past 3 years as well. So that's another thing to consider. Yeah, look, I think the Tim Tszyu fight makes a lot of sense at this stage, especially given it's a belt that he held, it's been given, but it wasn't taken off him. So I would think, um, Charlo would want to go and try and get that done.
Yeah, that I mean, there's a little bit of bias with us, man, but yeah,
Yeah,
that's absolutely the fight to make. Like, yes, he's a
yeah,
rising star. Charlo has been a bigger name for longer, but time has come. Zoo now holds his belt,
yeah,
and he's obviously decided he's going to go back down um, to that division because the struggle of moving up to classes and obviously meeting his match with Canelo. But
yeah,
yeah, I think the best thing for Charlo's name and his career would be to then get back his belt and and dispose of a top contender. I don't see anything wrong with that. And yeah, obviously a Bud Crawford fight, he'd want to make a mint from that, and
yeah.
obviously it's a big name for his career, but like you said, Crawford's tied up at the minute, and I don't think anyone's really
Absolutely, yeah,
clamoring to see that.
yeah. Plus, also, like, I mean, it's a lot more lucrative if it's a champion versus champion as opposed to something else. Like, especially after what we saw on Sunday and seeing what Canelo was able to do, right? Yeah, like in a lower weight class. Obviously, when you're
Mm.
matched for skill, right? I'm not saying they're all the same skill level, but they're in that same bracket, right? They're top level professional boxers. When you put them in a group, then weight divisions definitely do make sense, right? I mean, if you're going against an untrained opponent or an up and comer, weight divisions you may be able to get away with it, but when you're going against like equally experienced, skilled boxers, the weight divisions definitely play a part.
Mm.
Yeah, look, I mean, uh, we'll see. We'll see how things play out. And I think Tim Tszyu's got a fight coming up as well. Or he just had one. Is that correct?
Yeah, yep,
Yeah,
yep.
yeah. So yeah. Look, we'll wait. I mean, Tim Tszyu gave his thoughts on the fight as well. He said the same thing. He said
Mm.
Charlo looked like he was just trying to survive. He didn't seem like he wanted to go in there and fight. So yeah. Um, but look, man, like I know we've spoken about what's next for Charlo, but we also got to think about what's next for Canelo. What was encouraging for us boxing fans is like for him coming out to say, "Look, I enjoyed that a lot. This is it. I, effing love boxing. Um, it's been, this is the real Canelo, and this Canelo no one beats." And that's the sort of spirit that you want your best boxers to be in, right? And we've seen him, continuously speak about this Bivol rematch. The thing that's surrounding the Bivol rematch is that Bivol wants it at the 168 pounds, which is the super middleweight for Canelo, whereas Canelo wants to go to I believe it was a light heavyweight division to fight Bivol. That's Bivol's division, fighting for Bivol's belt. But Bivol's saying, "Hey, look, it doesn't make any sense. I already beat you. Now let me get an opportunity to fight for your belt." I see both sides. I see someone like Canelo who's got that sort of pride in him. He wants to get that win back, but no excuses. He wants to do it in the weight class that he lost. Kind of like Conor McGregor when he lost to Nate Diaz. He was very adamant that he wanted to do the rematch in 170, even though the UFC were trying to convince him to say, "Look, why don't we do it at 155 now that we have the time?" He said, "Nah, that's where he beat me. I want to do it there." So that's Canelo's a similar type of fighter. But then I also see Bivol's point. Well, I didn't get much reward last time. Obviously, other than the monetary reward, which is huge. You get a big payday fighting Canelo, but from a legacy point of view, like, yeah, you fought for my belts and you couldn't get it, right? And you can argue like he did outskill Canelo. You point for point, he beat him, and then so he's saying, give me a chance now to use my skill set to try and win your belt. So it's an interesting situation, but there is a fight that intrigues me a lot more than the Canelo Bivol, and we've spoken about this in our podcast a fair few times. There is one David Benavidez, who's
Yep.
who's lurking in the background. I know he's got a fight lined up, but
Mm.
it just goes against what we were talking about, Jamel Charlo and Terence Crawford. But I feel like that's a all Mexican showdown. Benavidez is just like his nickname, he's a monster. He has been undefeated, devastating finishes. He's been calling out Canelo, and I think it's time for Canelo to oblige. Right, they're the same weight division, same weight class. You know, let's get that
Yeah.
fight underway, because I feel like that generates a hell of a lot of revenue and a lot of interest among the boxing fans.
Yeah, we should. And yeah, if he's true to his word, DJ, and that he wants to prolong his career, he's in the best shape he feels. That's absolutely a matchup that we should get to,
Absolutely, yeah,
soon. Like I really do agree with you. Want to
yeah,
see that one. Obviously, yeah, the interest in that fight it'd be blockbuster. Um,
absolutely.
yeah, and I think this resounding win over a solid opponent, good opponent, and then yeah, shows that he's definitely the peak of his game. Um,
Yeah,
maybe yeah, we've talked about guys that are very active. Maybe not being as active can also help you prolong your career a bit. Um,
yeah,
less pounding, less sparring, less all of that.
yeah.
What are your
Less fight
thoughts?
camps. Yeah, no,
Yeah,
absolutely.
how
Like, I mean,
active do you think you expect Canelo to be?
oh man, it's a double-edged sword, right? Like, you gotta find the balance. I know we've spoken about this in terms of MMA ring rust and sort of how much that impacts it as well. And even in this case, we saw Jamel Charlo coming off of a big layoff and then coming into a big fight. It does have an impact, but at the same time, the other side to that is how much your body endures when you're going through this training camp. Especially the older you get, people like Canelo who are not at the start of their career. They're definitely towards the latter part of their career. So, there's only a certain amount of toll their body can take, no matter how well conditioned these guys are, and the nutrition and fitness regime that they follow. It doesn't mean that the human body is still the human body. Having said that, I think like nothing stops them from fighting at least twice a year. Let's not forget, like, in terms of boxing, obviously it's a little bit more grueling in terms of going 12 rounds, especially in these high caliber fights. And obviously the fight camps, like you pointed out, they take a lot out of you as well. Um, from a monetary point of view, looking at the other side of it, I don't think Canelo is in any desperate need to earn a coin, because his bank is looking pretty good given what he's done so far. So yeah, like, you make a good point in terms of how active they should be. I think like twice a year. Given that, just to not lose momentum. You don't want to delay it too much, right? You see some of these high level boxers, they certainly try and go 2 to 3 times a year, and then we do also see
Yeah,
some others who do take time. But yeah, it is what
definitely.
it
Yeah,
is.
yeah, that fine balance is huge, like you said, because
Yeah,
uh, one, you're staying active, but you're not, you're active enough to
yeah,
prolong your earnings. You obviously
yeah,
still want to be active because you haven't retired. You want to maximize your earnings, and you want to fight those big fights. You want to,
yeah,
go out with a bang. You don't want to be
yeah,
fighting bums to finish your career while you're
yeah,
still in your peak. you get the
Yeah,
mega matchups, you win, and then you go out on top. So
yeah.
I'm going to
I mean,
predict
look,
maybe a couple more years, and maybe you might call it a day. But
yeah, yeah,
hopefully in that
for sure.
period we do get the mega or continue to
Yeah,
get the
the
big
big fights.
names.
Yeah, I think if the Benavidez fight doesn't happen, it'll be a tragedy, to be honest. But again,
Mm.
look, in boxing, we're accustomed to not getting these big fights. I know we'll quickly touch on that before we wrap up, which is some big fights that got announced. One of those fights was something that we were calling for. We were hoping and praying that it gets done, and it looks like the combat gods have answered, which is the Usyk Fury. And we'll chat on that quickly. But yeah, you make another good point. Yeah, the activity sometimes being extremely active could you know, be at your detriment. One of the recent examples, if you look into the world of MMA, one of the greatest, middleweight champions, Israel Adesanya, we've seen how he's extremely active. And, there's a widespread notion that the reason that he lost recently, also that he suffered like two losses in his last three fights, is because of that, the pace and the activity, the level of activity that he's been showing. You can never like knock down someone for showing activity, like, especially someone in that stature, someone in that position. Don't need to fight as often as they do, but that shows the appetite for combat, for competition. And but it also, you got to start thinking about like how much does your body, like how are you letting your body recover fully before you go into the next one, and mentally as well. That's another big thing. It's just the mental part of it too. You got to let your mental aspect of everything heal as well. Especially using that same example, going into that second fight with Alex Pereira. You're going in with a lot of tension, a lot of mental stress, and knowing this guy is like not just beating me last time, but three times, bro. Right? So
Yep.
I need this is something I have to win, like all that, and then you got to let that mind recover. So yeah,
Yep. Absolutely. Yeah. Well, let's before we wrap up, hit on the big announcement. Like you said, been something that we had doubted, or I doubted was ever going to happen, but
yeah,
finally, Fury obviously is going to fight Francis Ngannou soon, but
yeah,
now we've locked in that unified heavyweight title clash against Alexander Usyk. What are your
yeah, absolutely.
initial thoughts when you saw that announced?
Oh, I'm absolutely thrilled, man. Like, I mean, it's something that we've been wanting to see. It's just that we've not had a unified world champion in a very, very long time, and then since Lennox Lewis, so let's heavyweight world champion. That is sorry. So let's get that done, and that's it. You got the two best boxers at the moment, and the two best heavyweight boxers, in my opinion, who will be fighting for that. I think it's rightful, it's apt. It's interesting that they didn't try and do the rematch for Daniel Dubois. And maybe they'll revisit that later with Usyk, with
Mm.
that controversy, with the body shot. Um, yeah, man, it's great. But it's just the only thing that surprised me is that they announced it while, the Fury Ngannou hadn't yet taken place. It's kind of, I would say it's kind of insulting to Francis Ngannou to be doing that. It kind of shows that they're underestimating him. But man, Francis Ngannou seems like he's taking it very seriously. So yeah, it's interesting. Like I think targeting December to January, but it depends on how this fight goes. If the October 28th fight goes, or whenever that is, the Fury Ngannou, if that goes doesn't go as favorable to Tyson Fury, I think what I'm trying to say is even if he wins, but if he carries a lot of damage, takes a lot of damage from that fight, it's going to be very interesting how quickly he can make that turnaround.
Yeah, definitely. Also, he'll if he wins convincingly, he'll be fresh off the sparring and the training and be fit.
Yeah,
If he doesn't take much damage, so yeah, like you
yeah,
said, it's a double-edged sword. But so happy that it's finally announced, and I could
absolutely.
actually see him calling it quits after that. Like two mega
Yeah,
fights. Let's say he wins both, wins the unify, retains and unifies the belts. I could see him retiring, going out with a bang.
Fury.
Yeah, what do you think?
Yeah, man. Like, I mean, look, if he were to win, I don't know. I have a feeling it depends. Boxing's a lot difficult to get fights made, but
Mm.
I would think there'll be two fights in that series, right? Like Usyk and Fury, given how the championship reign has been.
Yeah,
Uh, you
good
know,
point.
they've had their defenses. You'd think they'll give both of them a chance. Like whoever loses, you get another shot. Um, or from Fury's standpoint, if he were to win and unify the titles, yeah, that's the peak of it, right? Um, and the only thing I think left to do it, and if he wants to do it, I don't think it tarnishes his legacy in any way. Is that fighting Anthony Joshua? He's the only one from that big top four that he wouldn't have fought once he had finished fighting Usyk.
Yeah, absolutely agree with you. Yeah, that's one I could see him going out, with a bang. But
Yeah,
yeah, it's been great, DJ, to talk about Canelo's big win, that big heavyweight matchup coming up. More
yeah.
boxing content, MMA. Everyone, like, subscribe to the channel, CT with DJ, and we'll catch you on the next one.